television and news coverage, and we all jump to the bait, whether or not their cause is right and proper. Also on the show tonight, though, Steve will tell you what the rundown is.
Raising the Titanic. The ship that God himself couldn't sink sits at the bottom of the Atlantic off the coast of Newfoundland, now a graveyard for 1,500 passengers. Tonight, 2 men who led the expedition to find the mammoth ship, Jean Jarry, the leader of the French team, and Emory Kristof, chief photographer for National Geographic. Also tonight, Greenpeace takes on the U.S. Navy. But what about their tactics? Are they risking lives to get headlines? In the studio with Webster, Jim Bohlen, the National Disarmament Coordinator for Greenpeace.
Nobody was drowned today by the grace of God. Is that correct, Mr. Bohlen, National Disarmament Coordinator of Greenpeace?
Yeah, nobody was drowned, but we feel very grievously injured by the unnecessary force that was taken by the Vancouver Police Department.
I will not accept that off the top, but you put yourself in a position whereby you were impeding in some way the procession of official visitors to this country, the Constitution and the other presumably nuclear capability warships, and out you go with your little Zodiacs. You probably ignored the restrictions. The police come round and swamp your boats, and all of a sudden you're martyrs. Why couldn't you do these protests without these over-dramatic moments?
Well, the history of protesting against the presence of nuclear weapons in Canada goes back approximately 30 years to the Diefenbaker era.
I remember well the nonsense about the Beaumont missiles and all the rest of it.
And nothing much really works. I mean, Prime Minister Mulroney has told us numerous times that Canada is a nuclear weapons-free country.
Has he? You mean to say he said that clearly in one tolerable sentence?
During his 1984 campaign promises, that was one of the things that he promised the people of Canada.
Oh, that's a political promise. But are you telling me, Jim Bohlen, that the only way to protest against nuclear moves in this country is by violence?
No. I mean, no one's saying, look, Greenpeace is not violent. Greenpeace has always been in a position where it uses non-violent direct action as in the spirit of Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King to get across our point.
And sometimes you make mistakes and have to crawl back and apologize publicly, like some of the ceiling damage you did, for which you now apologize.
Greenpeace has been, I don't want to get into that because Greenpeace has been victimized by the fur interests in
Am I dreaming, or do I remember apologies to the Inuit about ruining their native lifestyle?
We apologize to the Inuit for being misinterpreted by the media, which manipulated Greenpeace into a position where they were starting to be blamed for the economic destruction of the native peoples.
The day that the media manipulates Greenpeace, I shall dance naked at the corner of Broadway and Granville Street. Let's get back to the basic point. You went out there today, knowing that the police had instructions to keep you away. First of all, let's look at the little clip of what nearly happened. Watch closely, folks. There we are. What's happening now? Where is that precisely? That's outside the Lionsgate Bridge.
I saw it just about like that. It's in the center of English Bay, and that police boat is acting in an absolutely outrageous manner by weaving back and forth, and in fact virtually swamped one of our boats. It was 20 minutes after any kind of confrontation that was supposed to have taken place between the
How far were you from the American battleships?
At the time of the arrest, we were more than half a mile away, and that's a lot further than 100 meters.
Your instructions were 100 meters, but you didn't measure them with a tape measure.
Well,
you may have been proceeding at high speed into a danger zone, for all I know at the moment.
No, we know what we're doing. Look, when you're a David confronting a Goliath, you better be right or you're going to be dead, right?
There it is again. He's now going to cut across the bow, and the little boat on the right gets filled with water.
That's right. And then they swooped over and they made threatening motions towards the boat with a long stick with a steel tipped harpoon on the end of it. So they're going to poke the air-inflated vessel full of holes and sink us.
I happen to be a
Isn't that outrageous?
Well, I don't know. I don't necessarily accept yours because you're filled with motives to create publicity, and you may well have planned this knowing you'd infuriate the police and perhaps get arrested. What wonderful publicity.
Yeah, but Jack, we're not the fly trying to capture the fly paper, you know.
Well, yes, you are. You are in some ways. 2 men were arrested. You weren't out in these boats yourself, were you? Supposing somebody had got drowned today, you'd have blamed the police.
Well, the people who go on any of our missions are people who have a vision of being able to contribute to saving the planet. And so strong is their feeling that they are willing to put themselves between the oppressed and the oppressor.
And you'll tell me quite honestly that they and you are quite willing to risk your lives and die in the cause of drawing attention to the need for utter nuclear disarmament.
Yes.
Okay, that's fair enough. That might go against you in a civil suit if somebody gets drowned. Bohlen said to Webster, if we have to die, we have to die. Right?
Yes.
That's fair enough. I don't argue with you now. And probably the charges won't be proceeded with anyone, who knows. Now, what's next with Greenpeace? Are you going to do this all again tomorrow so we can take closer pictures?
Greenpeace has made its point in relation to this particular visit of the nuclear-armed ships in the Vancouver harbor. We have a program for 1987 where we're going to extend this particular type of action all over Canada.
Well, I feel kind of badly about the guys in the U.S. Navy, the fellows on the ships. They're in town to see Expo. Nobody knows whether or not they have nuclear capability, whether or not they carry nuclear missiles. But if they do, they carry them with the permission and the knowledge of the same Canadian Prime Minister you were talking about, right?
That's right.
And they came here by official invitation.
No, they wanted to come here, and they asked the Canadian government if they could come here, and the Canadian government said yes. And that, to me, is a really weird thing to do.
Thousands of people in Vancouver are delighted to see the American sailors, and you know that well.
We are delighted to see the Americans.
And you don't welcome them at all.
Yes, we do.
You say, get the hell out.
We welcome the American sailors, but not with their nuclear weapons. We want the nuclear weapons out, but the American sailors are more than welcome to visit our beautiful city.
Let's put it this way. We'll take some phone calls on this. Is Bohlen totally right? If he's prepared to die, that's his business. But is this the way we should treat our guests who are sailing happily into our ports, you know? Is Webster right or is Bohlen right? Have a bash at it on the phones after the break. Jim Bohlen is the National Disarmament Coordinator for the world-famous and world-circling Greenpeace, which started in very modest circumstances in the city of Vancouver. How many years ago?
Exactly 15 years ago tomorrow morning.
Okay, I'm going to go right down the line. Oh, happy birthday.
Thank you, Jack.
And I helped you to start it,
You bet
too.
you did. You raised over $8,000 for us when we sorely needed it.
I wouldn't do it tonight. Go ahead, please.
Hello.
Yes.
Jack, do you support Greenpeace in this?
No.
You're getting reactionary, Jack. What did Dr. Helen Caldecott teach you? Nothing? You should go pick up a book by Gandhi and start reading it again.
Okay, boy, thanks very much. One up for you, Jimmy. Go ahead, please.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, I remember Prime Minister Mulroney promising that Canada would be a nuclear-free zone, and I also remember Mike Harcourt also saying that the city of Vancouver would not allow nuclear weapons in its bay.
Well, that, of course, was an impractical statement by his worship. That's two up for you, Jimmy. Go ahead, please.
Good afternoon, Jack.
Yes.
I'd just like to say that I don't necessarily believe in everything Greenpeace stands for, but it's very necessary for us to stand up for humanity in terms of nuclear-free disarmament. And
Well, of course I'm with you on that one. I was trying to narrow it, Jimmy, and I'm being
well, if
caught in
we-
my own bite of the way you behaved today. Did they behave properly or badly today? That's the point, and he thinks you behaved properly. Go ahead, please.
Hello, Jack.
Yes.
I'd just like to say that putting their lives on the line like this is kind of silly. It doesn't really prove anything. And also, I'd like to bring up the wolf kill of a couple of years ago. I was living in the Northwest Territories at that time, and I really believe that Greenpeace is, for the most part, city slickers that do not understand what goes on in the backwoods of the country.
There's a good one for you. Mind you, it was Watson who got in the mess over the wolf kill, wasn't it?
Yes, so Watson has absolutely nothing to do with Greenpeace.
Not anymore.
Not
Used to
anymore.
have.
Yeah.
You agree, though, that that was badly handled by Watson? Or would you rather not
I'll
comment?
neither confirm nor deny.
Go ahead, please.
Hi. I'd just like to say that I believe and agree with what Greenpeace has been doing in general, and I see nothing wrong with this gentleman's side or version of what
Tactics.
he's doing.
You approve of the tactics?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Hello, yes.
Yes.
Yes, I don't think it's very safe to be going out in front of those boats, and I think the point is it's very dangerous to do something like that, but the American ships, you know, they're invited by Canada. I don't think that's kind of an embarrassment to Canada by doing that, you know. I think they should go about it a different way.
What do you think to that, Jimmy?
I think one of the things that we are wanting to do is to embarrass not Canada, but the Canadian government, they are absolutely wrong in their approach by telling us in one respect that we're a nuclear-free country, and in another respect, they're telling us and indicating to us that we accept nuclear weapons in our harbors, and we just do not want them.
Haven't we still got missiles at Comox?
No, the missiles in Comox were removed 2 years ago, July.
But we still got the U.S. missile submarine testing in Manus Bay.
Yes, and...
but no warheads.
Again, the United States will not confirm or deny the existence of nuclear weapons on board their vessels, and because they do not, we assume that they have them there.
So you want us to smash the alliance with the Americans, pull out the cruise missile testing, pull out of all the treaties that we're presently in, NORAD, NATO, and the rest of it in defense of the free world?
That's not true. What we would like to see is Canada to have its own non-aligned, independent defense policy, because Canada is squarely the meat in the sandwich between the United States and the Soviet Union in a confrontation between those two powers.
It's a pity, though, that you well know that we are an economic, baby of the United States, and we need all we can get, and we'll sell them anything in the way of arms or ammunition that we can, wouldn't we?
Well, no, I think that there are a lot of people in this country who, if they had their way, would eliminate the sale of weapons to nations that are not doing things that are constructive in this world.
Go ahead, please.
Hello, I was wondering if you believe that a majority of Canadians agree with what you're doing, if you've taken any polls or whatever.
You're talking to Jim Bohlen.
Yeah.
Yes, there was a poll taken by the Toronto Star in, I think it was about a year ago. And across Canada, 58% of all Canadians think that what Greenpeace is doing is worthwhile, in fact necessary. And over 60% of those people polled actively support Greenpeace. So Greenpeace has a very, very large number of people that support us. In fact, around the world, Greenpeace has over 2 million members and approximately 80,000 members, and those are people who contribute money to Greenpeace in Canada.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, I agree with your guest, Jim Bohlen. I'd like to ask you a question, Mr. Webster.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever protested anything?
Yes, a number of things. My only major protest was Hitler. Did you hear me?
Yes, I did. Is there anything else you protested against, you feel
Yeah.
strongly about?
Yes, I protested against a legion, a myriad of injustices in our society.
And do you think this is an injustice?
No, I think it's a stupid tactic by Greenpeace to get somebody drowned or arrested and then blame the police.
But isn't that their choice?
Oh, sure, and I've been told quite freely tonight by Mr. Bohlen that if they want to get drowned, if they get drowned, they get drowned.
Well, I think that's a different issue, but I think that they have a right to protest, don't you?
Total right to protest, but they should do it within the law and without being quite so ill-considered in the way they do it.
But don't you think these are kind of extreme conditions? This is calamitous. This is potentially world-destroying.
Oh, agreed entirely, but I feel it's been overdone a little bit and that we all jump to it through the hoops because they say we're going to be out there. Some of us may get drowned. Do come and cover it. Thank you very much. Okay, boy, much obliged. Question is supposed to be to you. Where's that from? Riondell. Go ahead, please.
Hi, Mr. Bohlen. I agree with what has been happening today with Greenpeace. And also there was a fellow made a mention about a city slicker and the thing with the wolves, where there was lots of country people who were definitely opposed to the wolf kill. Mr. Webster, at times you sound like a right-wing reactionary in your pattern. If these people won't tell us if they have nuclear weapons, they should have. Even if we have a policy that they can come in, they should tell us before they come. And we all remember what happened in New Zealand. Perhaps these people will remember now. That's all I can say.
Good point. Thank you very much. Go ahead from Chilliwack.
Hello, Jack.
Hello there.
I'm a military medic, just got stationed in Quebec, from Quebec. I think you should be syndicated rest of Canada. But I have a question to Jim there.
You're another reactionary like me on this particular small piece of this big issue.
Yes,
but
I'd like to ask Jim what percentage of his funding is directed, and if he could elaborate, which percentage is funded on the Eastern Bloc, and I'll hang up to listen to the answer.
We don't understand you. What are you talking about?
I'd like to know how much funding from Greenpeace is directed to educating the people, like he's educating North Americans. How much is he putting towards educating the folks on the other side of the bridge?
Oh, I see.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Our nuclear potential enemies.
Yeah. In the Soviet Union has been the subject of a number of direct actions by Greenpeace. One of them, approximately 3 years ago, was in Leningrad, where the Greenpeace vessel Sirius sailed into the harbor in Leningrad and wanted to have a conversation with the leading Soviet politicians relating to the Soviet nuclear armaments policy. And that interview was refused, and instead, and Greenpeace released over 1,000 helium-filled balloons with messages on them to the Soviet people, requesting them to demand that the Soviet Union re-examine their nuclear policy, which at that time was leading towards confrontation between them and the United States.
Last call. Go ahead, please.
Hello. I just wanted, Jack Webster, I think that you're absolutely right. I think these people behaved in an asinine fashion. They should never have been out in a harbor to try to prevent or obstruct someone who has been invited by the government of Canada. I strongly do not believe that the United States sends vessels all over the world and into our ports carrying nuclear warheads that just might explode. I think it's a foul thing that they're doing, and I'm with you.
Thank you. Well, you outnumbered me about 10 to 1 on that. My point, if I may repeat myself just a smidgen, is that I now know that if you get drowned, you'll accept it as a martyr to the cause.
Yes, Jack.
Good. My thanks to Jimmy Bohlen. Known you for a long while, James.
You bet. Long time, Jack.
And I'm going to talk about something a little less troublesome, but and just as fascinating. The discovery of the Titanic and allied underwater topics after the break. My two guests now are Jean Jarry, who is one of the French scientists. He's Chief of Sub-Ocean Operations, French Institute of Research for Exploration of the Seas, and was co-director of the joint French-American expedition that found the Titanic in 1985. And I have an equally fascinating guest, black beard and all, Emory Kristof, staff photographer, high-tech, deep ocean photography for none other than the beloved National Geographic Society of Washington, D.C. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
I think what we'll do first, 15 seconds from now, is look at a little piece of background which will help to explain some of the work done by gentlemen like these. We'll watch that right now.
It's unusual to see a ship on Burrard Street at any time, least of all the Titanic. But this 20-foot model stopped both traffic and pedestrians while it was being unloaded and moved into the lobby of the Hotel Vancouver. Built from the original Titanic blueprints, this model gives a glimpse of what was once the largest passenger ship ever built. Taking 3 years to build, the Titanic struck an iceberg and sank only 4 days into her maiden voyage. In the past 64 years, more than 100 books and a dozen movies have told what happened on April 14th, 1912.
Abandon ship! Every man for himself!
Of the few people who survived the sinking, one woman, now living in Vancouver, can't understand the ongoing interest.
And all our relatives at home say, oh, they'd come up to Mother and say, Bess, aren't you lucky getting on that wonderful ship, the biggest ship that's ever been launched? And it was a beautiful ship.
Do you think they should try and bring up parts of it?
She's in two pieces.
That's correct.
She broke.
Before
she was going down the nose this way, and she broke between the four funnels, up like that and down. But
do you think they should try and bring up parts of it?
what good would it do?
They have pictures of it.
I wouldn't bother even going to look at them.
But look at it they have. In 1985, a joint French-American expedition located the Titanic in more than 2 miles of water. Scientists have probed the remains of the ocean liner during 2 separate trips to the site. Scientists say they're satisfied with the 60 hours of videotape and thousands of still photographs taken of the cruise ship, and say except for the few relics already recovered, the possibility of raising her are extremely slim. The world may never get to see anything more than a few relics from this Leviathan of the Atlantic, but you can see the model here at the Hotel Vancouver until Friday. Then it goes to Expo for a week and ends up at the Vancouver Maritime Museum until year's end.
Well, that was a fascinating little piece. And here's Jean Jarry. First of all, Jean Jarry, how did you find the thing in the Atlantic Ocean, wherever it was?
It was a long search. Several expeditions tried before us and were not successful. So we were obliged first to study very carefully all the documents from the archives to have a better idea of the location, to reduce the area of uncertainty. And we reduced that to an area of about 400 square kilometers, 3 times the surface of Paris. That's a lot.
That I can understand. 3 times the size of Paris. You knew it was there somewhere. And other expeditions had tried and failed, but you had all kinds of new equipment.
Yes. On the French side, we had a very sophisticated side-scan sonar, which can make the topography of the sea bottom with a range of 1 kilometer.
A sonar?
A sonar.
It bounces the sound waves back and forward.
Exactly, exactly. And with that sonar, we started in July last year to cover the area. And we worked for 6 weeks. But at the end of the 6 weeks, we have looked not all the areas, it was too wide, but almost 80%. And we have not found the Titanic, but we were sure that she was on the remaining 20%.
So you changed your tactics?
Yes. And at that time, we, with the American, we went aboard the American ship, the Nore, with a different equipment, not a sonar at that time, but a video camera towed above the sea bottom.
Towed.
Forgive me. Remorqué. Remorqué. And after 5 or 6 days, just 2 days before the end of the cruise, we found the Titanic.
What did you were there when you saw it on the camera?
We were not there, we were on bed, but our colleagues were there. My good friend Jean-Louis Michel was there. It was 1 in the morning, 1 a.m., and it was looking at the TV screen after hours and hours of boring sea bottom with nothing but boulders and sound waves and something like that. And suddenly, he observed a big shadow, and the shadow went closer and closer, and it could see 3 holes in the shadow. And at that time, he was sure that it was a boiler from the Titanic, because the boiler were cylinders with 3 entries for the furnaces.
And he said in French?
And I think he said in French, c'est le Titanic.
C'est le Titanic, eh? After that, though, there was a lot of work to do before the expedition finally got down in detail. Is that not correct?
Yes. After that, we searched for all the things, and we found not only the boiler, but also the ship broken in 2.
And all the wine bottles.
All the wine bottles?
Yes,
all the wine bottles.
Wine bottles and the plates and chamber pots and mattresses and everything. Thousands of objects.
And of course there had been 1,500 people who died in that thing at that particular time.
Yes, more of them died on surface. They were drowned or died from cold.
How deep is can you tell how deep any part of the Titanic is in the sludge in the bottom of the ocean?
Yes, after the last picture we saw, we think that the bow of the Titanic is buried about 10 to 15 meters in the mud.
Now, this is something the National Geographic will eventually do with you down on a deep ocean camera.
Oh, they've already done it. It's in the December issue.
And this is the continuing expedition. And did they learn any more about the state of the ship then? Because at that time you couldn't see if there was a huge gash in the bow from the famous iceberg, could you?
No, because if there is a gash, it's buried.
They don't even know now. It's, where the gash would be is down below the silt level. And they do know that they've seen buckled plates, and they don't know whether that happened when the ship hit the bottom or when it hit the iceberg.
Now that's at 12,000 foot level, is that correct?
Yes, about 3,900 meters.
After the camera towed, has anyone been down in submersibles close into the thing?
Well, that's what they did this year. They went out there with Alvin, and they made the dives, and they used a little underwater robot that went off of the Alvin to go down inside the ship and take a look. And there was some pictures they had of a chandelier from the inside, and they did a lot more close-ups than what was done before.
Was it confirmed that the ship broke in two?
Oh yes, it's confirmed. The two parts are about 300 meters apart.
And then there's a whole section of the ship in the center which is really just missing, that probably just got reduced to rubble. It looked like carrying a cigar or something.
No, but when she broke it back, obviously, with the water in the front and the rest still afloat, and that stuff would be reduced by the ocean, whatever it is.
Probably.
Yeah.
Could it ever be raised?
In fact, it could not be raised in one part because there are many parts. So, after the last dive, the ship is in so bad shape, corrosion has been produced. And so, if we try to leave something, I don't know with which equipment, it would cost
It would be
$1 million.
Normally they bring up ships by patching the holes and pumping air in, don't they? But they couldn't do that with it. No, it'd be impossible.
You could go build yourself several brand new Titanics for what it would cost you to try to bring up the pieces down there.
So it'll probably become a memorial in the graveyard, I suppose.
That's what it is.
I'm going to talk to you in detail about high tech and more about the Titanic with my friend Emory Kristof and Jean Jarry after the break. I have a connection with the Titanic myself, Jean. I was born on the 15th of April.
But 1912?
No. I'll sue you for that. 1918. I'm 6 years younger than the Titanic and not much better shape either. Now, Emory Kristof, high-tech, deep ocean staff photographer, this prestigious National Geographic. We're going to look at this little presentation we have first, which tells some of the kind of what you do. Now, tell me about that.
Well, this is one of these new little underwater robots which can go deeper than a diver can go down and stay down longer and doesn't mind the cold and doesn't eat much. And it's being photographed by another robot that the Geographic has. You can see all the nice digital readout. We're down at 211 feet, and we've got a heading there of about 68 degrees, and it's 2 feet off the bottom. And I love it. I've been a diver for a long time. I no longer have to get wet or cold.
How big is that little submersible?
Oh, that little guy is just about like a little over 2 feet.
A little over 2 feet? Tiny little thing, containing camera equipment and all. What are we doing now?
Oh, we're down on a ship called the Kamloops. It's up there off the Isle Royal Park. And it went down in 1927, and we've dropped into the engine room, and we were looking at one of the men in the engine room that didn't get out of the ship. It was in the wintertime, it was very cold. It was probably the last warm spot on the ship, and he's probably wearing all of the clothing that he had.
Where was this?
This is up, there's a national park in the United States right across from Thunder Bay.
Oh, yeah,
at Isle Royal, Lake Superior. And there's, now we're going back. This is what you like to see in your ROV, see it safely come back up to the surface. And a little retrieval.
Was that the little thing? There it is there. Oh, good. I hope we see that.
Now, that's the bigger one. That's a big brother to the little one. That's about 4 foot long. And that belongs to the National Geographic, and that's how I do a lot of
that goes down, and another little robot goes from it, right?
Well, one of these days, we actually put down 2 of them from the ship, and then we had 2 guys sitting side by side that are both playing video games. And we look for people that are good at video games to pilot these things.
Yeah, you got to be really delicate.
Oh, right.
Now, what about the deep sea diving? You do some of that in the submersibles too, don't you?
Yeah, I'm up here to talk tomorrow night about deep sea sharks, a project I've been doing with Eugenie Clark, and It's the first time these animals have been seen down at 2,000 feet.
Tell me about it. Where was this? What happened?
Well, we never have seen very much in the deep sea, really, after BB. That's a lot of the things that he described, because the last 25 years we've had like underwater jeeps, and you go down with your lights on and driving around, and it kind of scares everything away. It's the real sea monsters.
Like a kind of snowmobile in the water.
Exactly. And so when we went down for the first time, we sat down on the bottom, turned off all the lights, and put a lunch out in front, and the big animals came into us. And it's
at what depth?
2,000 feet.
What kind of animals?
These are large deep water sharks that normally are not seen anywhere near the surface. They've got large green eyes, and they're called 6-gill sharks. Normal sharks have got 5 gills, and these are more primitive. And we also had a lot of the fish that BB saw that we have never seen from a submersible that came into us because we had the lights off. And when we turned the lights on to make the television pictures, they all ran every which way. But we're now going to be able to sample them and do experiments with them.
And now you're going to be able to take the pictures without turning on the big fancy lights too, presumably.
We're doing a little bit of that. We've got a 1 million ASA camera system we're using.
Which?
1 million ASA.
You mean I use 100 ASA or 250 ASA?
And this is 1 million ASA.
You use 1 million ASA to capture all the conceivable light.
Yeah, we're beginning to use little chemical lights that look like the fish's lights for these things. It's getting to be pretty...
You mean like little glowworms which might pass as kind of material native to that part of the sea?
In fact, the animals like them so much they eat them right off the long lines and off of our packages for us.
Well, this the National Geographic, of course, is a scientific research institution on its own, is it not?
A little bit we do, and we finance other people's research too, like Dr. Clark's. And Bob Ballard's. A lot of the technology for the Titanic came out of money that was put up by the Geographic.
Now, you've done the Titanic. Are you going to do a piece on that ship in the National Geographic that you just showed us just now?
This is part of a story that's being done on the Great Lakes, which is a long-term project. And it was a look at this national park that has these ships in it, and a section of the park that's doing the archaeology and now beginning to show these things to people who come to the
Well, you know, we've been told for years that all the ores and valuable minerals we will ever need are lying loose on the floor of the ocean in various places. Is that true? Mineral recovery from the floor of the ocean? Is that possible?
Oh, yes,
very, very much.
Yes. Many countries work on that. But if the progress are so slow, it is because the minerals from the oceans are not economically good now. But maybe in 20 years from now, it can be okay when the minerals on land will be exhausted.
Oh, nobody would ever be allowed to mine minerals. They can't drill oil wells anymore without the most incredible holocaust of protest, can they?
I think maybe in the 21st century, people's ideas might change a little bit. Either that will be making everything out of plastic. So
yeah, well, that's just as bad either way, is it not? Now, I think I've got some calls here, have I not? I know I've got one call here. Any calls on the Titanic?
Hello?
You want to talk about the Titanic or deep sea photography?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was wondering about...
Turn down your television sound. Hold on, please. We'll try somebody else. Go ahead, please.
Yes, very quickly, two-pronged question. Why do some ships seem not to corrode at all in deep-sea situations, and then other ships like the Titanic is corroding? And secondly, what's the next big prize? I mean, the Titanic's being found. What's the next big jewel in the ocean?
Good question. What's the next big target in the ocean for you people to find and perhaps recover? Who knows?
I think there is no very target as big as Titanic.
Big as the Titanic.
But I think there are many targets, maybe smaller, and that can be of some interest. Unfortunately, there are many acts of war or terrorism or accidents in our world, and we will have the occasion to go and to retrieve something.
To whom does the Titanic belong now? The original owners, I suppose.
I think right now it belongs to the deep sea.
And there is no suggestion of any masses of gold or treasure on that boat, is there?
No.
I think actually your next big treasures are your well-preserved Spanish ships that are going to be in deep water and the ships in the Mediterranean.
But a number of your American colleagues have walked away with hundreds of millions of recovery of gold and jewels.
Well, those are your shallow water ships that are all broken up. I refer to these ships that look like ships on the bottom as ghost ships. And of course, we have seen them up the BOHLEN in the Northwest Passage. I worked with Dr. McGinnis on that, and the 2 American warships in Lake Ontario that were perfectly preserved. And a lot of your good preserved ships are in like your freshwater, and we don't quite understand much about what's happening in the breakdown of ships in deep water. That's why the Titanic was very, very interesting to us. And like all the
freshwater is not nearly so damaging to wood as saltwater, is it?
Well, the interesting thing is the things that eat the wood. Like the Titanic, all the wood is gone. But in the Bredoblin, which is also in saltwater, it's been there twice as long, the woods there is fine.
When you say these are ghost ships, that means if you touch them, they disappear.
Well, not exactly, but we told them it breaks, it can break. And after, to answer to the man we interrogated about corrosion, corrosion is a very complicated phenomena, and many parameters are there, and so it is always difficult to forecast exactly what will happen.
We're learning.
Good. Let's go to another call. From Prince George. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, it was supposed to be very expensive when you bought a ticket to go on. There was a lot of very wealthy people.
Where was this? On the Titanic?
Yeah, about $4,000 for first class.
Yeah, well, there was a lot of money in that, and jewels, and they say a lot of gold. What was the estimated value of, say, went down with the Titanic?
Well, the most valuable thing on the Titanic that went down was a copy of the Rubaiyat by Omar Khayyam, and it was bejeweled, and I figured today it would be worth $250,000. There's some old cars on there, but the ship took so long to sink that they actually had opened up the first class safes on there, and what jewelry was on went out with the ladies that got in the lifeboats. So there's nothing of any great value on the Titanic.
Was that the one where they made the movie about the American woman? What was her name? Brown?
Oh, Unsinkable Molly Brown.
She was on the Titanic.
She was on the Titanic. She wound up firing pistols in the air to get people organized.
Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Hi. I have two questions for you. Was there an indoor pool on the Titanic?
I don't know. Was there an indoor pool on the Titanic? Must have been.
Yeah,
yes,
there was.
yes, sure.
Sure was.
Sure, and on the sea bottom, we noticed the tiles of the swimming pool because there were different tiles, and we could recognize the tiles of the swimming pool.
Yes, there was.
Yeah. Okay, and I was also wondering, how much did the Titanic weigh?
Weight 66,000 tons.
Wow, okay.
66,000 old-fashioned simple tons.
Yeah, she was a big one.
She was. Thank you very much. Go ahead, please.
Hi. Shortly after the Titanic sunk, there was a book written by a Colonel Archibald Gracie, and it deals with, he was a survivor, and it deals with most of the survivors' accounts, and there was a long court case about it with the owners.
Mm-hmm.
There was a great deal of controversy about when it actually went down, how the ship, whether it cracked in half as it was sinking. And I noticed in the recent Time article that the leader of your expedition thinks that it cracked after it got down 1,000 feet or so.
Let's ask Jean Jarry about that. Any thoughts
Yes,
on that, Jean?
yes, we think also that the ship broke in the first 100 feet.
Yeah, we disagree among ourselves even how it's done.
Yes.
Yeah.
That it wouldn't break on the bottom.
Ah, no, because, and we are sure that it did not break on the bottom because the two parts of the Titanic are 300 or 400 meters apart.
So and they were floating down,
yes,
dropping down separately.
And the aft part is 180 degrees rotated.
They're at angles to each other.
Yeah, turn right around.
Concrete proof that they broke not very far from the surface.
Yes.
The water was how deep? 12,000 feet?
Yes, about 3,900 meters.
Part of it.
3 times 4 is 12. Close enough. 12 or 13,000 feet. I'll be back with more on the Titanic or whatever's on your mind after the break. These two distinguished gentlemen, Jean Jarry and Emory Kristof, are here for a special function, and this is the function, if you put that thing up. Put this thing up. New Horizons in the Ocean, 8 p.m., Friday, September 12th, Hotel Vancouver Ballroom. What are you going to be talking about, Jean?
About
tomorrow night?
Tomorrow, yes. I will talk about the Titanic, surely, and how it was possible, what is the state of the art of the underwater technology now.
And you?
And we were talking about them big deep sea sharks.
Yeah, giant. They're not that big, though, are they?
Well, the ones we're getting are 15 feet, and they're juveniles. And we figured a big one, a pregnant female, is about 25 feet or so. Make the great white look like a minnow.
Are you going to catch one and bring it up?
We might do that.
Don't like Greenpeace, no. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Jack.
Yeah.
Just hoping if one of these two gentlemen could refer me to a book that would best depict the last voyage of the Titanic. And if so, who's it by? And I also would like to know about the Edmund Fitzgerald.
The Edmunds what?
Fitzgerald.
Edmund Fitzgerald.
Yes.
Okay, well, let's see. The best book, I imagine, is still Walter Lord, A Night to Remember.
Uh-huh.
And I think that holds up very well. In fact, Walter Lord has a new book out that has his latest thinkings about the Titanic since it was found last year.
All right.
And that's just out on the market.
Okay, well, thank you.
And then the Edmunds Fitzgerald, that's, well, it's that great ore freighter that went down up there in Lake Superior. In fact, I was just up in that area where they have the museum and a great big model of her.
A big wartime cargo ship.
Well, no, she went down in the, I believe it was the 70s, and it was a big Coast Guard case about the safety involved.
Wasn't there some talk of the gunboat? What was that gunboat that fought the British? Was
that was Hamilton and the Scourge, Lake Ontario.
That was salvaged, was it?
Not yet. She's still down 300 feet. Another ghost ships.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, Mr. Webster. Mr. Kristof, is he making the statement that this is the first time that a six-gill shark has ever been spotted?
No.
I believe him to be wrong because 7 or 8 years ago, don't you remember, 2 sharks were caught in fisherman's net and were given to the Vancouver Aquarium, and they were six-gill sharks.
No, there are 2 species of six-gill sharks that are known. We think we found a third. What I said is the first time that they've been seen down there at the depths at which they normally operate. We've caught them for years on long lines. In fact, we did the catching before we went out there to try to see them in the wild, just to know that they were there. The sharks are known, they have been caught, and there have been some seen out here like off the west coast here at some times of the year, about 100 foot of water.
Good, thank you. Go ahead, please.
Yes, 2 questions, gentlemen. Firstly, how long did it take for the old Titanic to sink? And secondly, the distance that it covered, given the angle when it sunk, what kind of mileage are we talking about there?
How long did it take to sink, Jean?
I think it is about 2 hours and 30 minutes, something like that.
Right.
Between 11:40 and 2:20.
Or did he want to know how long it took it to get down once it started to go through the water column?
Right.
To the water column, so...
who knows?
20 minutes, maybe.
Well, something like that.
Something like 20 minutes it took it to go down.
It would take 20 minutes to settle, and it was over 2.5 hours it took to sink.
I think the speed must be about maybe 25 kilometers per hour.
You find your ships today were not much faster than the old Titanic. She could do 22 knots.
Well, when she started to go down, there's this kind of a rate that things will sink in the ocean. It would take about 20 minutes to go down that dip.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, Jack, I was wondering regarding the Titanic, whether they had happened to see any human remains while they were down there. I'll hang up and listen.
Have they been seen at all? I don't think so.
No, there are no human remains. In fact, you wouldn't expect to.
After all these years. No, would you want to? Go ahead, please.
Jack?
Yes.
What I'm trying to find out is, did they bring any artifacts up from the Titanic in regards to, like, the safe or bottles of wine or anything? And number 2, is there anything in the future to bring the Breadalbane up?
Okay. No, they didn't bring anything up from the Titanic. They left it all there. And the Breadalbane, I don't know of any plans at all to go back there. I've talked to Joe McGinnis quite regularly, and we figured that we had done that one back in '83 and have no plans to go back.
Go ahead from Quadra.
Yes, I was wondering if there's any way that we could see the videotapes that they have made of the Titanic.
Well, what was that fuss about pictures?
Okay, there's going to be a story in the National Geographic in December, which will have a lot more material than has been seen to this point. And then there is a Geographic television special that is being done on the Titanic, 1 hour, that will be on sometime, I don't know, it's going to be early next year. I believe it's going to be early next year.
Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Hello, Jack?
Yes.
I'm from White Rock. We had friends here. It was on the Titanic, a Mr. and Mrs. Norris.
Well, I'm glad they escaped.
Yeah.
And they used to tell us of the calamity and the terror amongst the passengers.
I can imagine it.
They told us some terrible stories.
Well, I don't want to hear the gruesome stories tonight, but...
I have another thing. There was a song published about the Titanic called A Ship That Will Never Return. Does anybody remember that? Because we do. We have the whole words.
It was sad when a great ship went down. Yep. I don't know much more of it than that. I'll have to pass.
It was sad when the great ship went down.
Yeah, and there was a chorus. That's the chorus in it. It was sad when the great ship went down.
Go ahead, please.
Hello?
Yes.
I was on the Titanic. I was 10 years old. My grandfather was captain
of the America, a tender which took the mails from Ireland out to the old head of Kinsale to put them aboard the American liners because they were too big to come into Cork Harbour. And went out to the Titanic. He brought me with him. And while the men were carrying the mail on their back up the companionway, Captain Tobin, my grandfather, and I went on board, and Captain Smith took us into one of the lounges, and my grandfather had a scotch, I think, and I had a bottle of stone ginger beer. You, Mr. Webster, might remember it. It was a stone bottle with a fat monk on the front. Very hot. And I drank this, and Captain Smith brought us out and said goodbye to us, and we went down the companionway onto the America.
Was that before the trip in which you went
the
under?
mails out, yes,
Yeah.
from Cork Harbour to the old head of Kinsale.
That was her last stop before
And
she sailed.
we laid off for a while, and the Titanic was just getting dark. I can see her four funnels now, and all the people looking over the rail. The lights were coming on, and the band was playing, and she blew her siren, this terrific booming noise, and we blew ours, and we stayed there for about an hour watching her sail away. When we came back into Cork Harbour. And then we were about the last people to see the Titanic, but I can say I was on board of her.
I'm glad you weren't on board her at the time.
You had the good trip.
You were saying that the Cork was her last landfall.
Yeah.
Before she headed out into the Atlantic. Go ahead, please.
Yes. What was the emotional feeling when you seen the first pictures?
Well, can you repeat the question? I did not.
The emotional
How did
feeling
you
when
feel
you saw the first
emotionally when you saw the pictures on the towed
yes,
camera?
I think it was for us the end of a long search, and we were very, very happy, too happy to have reached our goal at that time. And the second feeling was emotional to remember the disaster and the people who died.
The people who died.
They went-
1,500.
Yeah, we went out just about 10 minutes after we found the ship, and Dr. Ballard had a small service on the fantail to remember the people who were lost. And we broke out the flag of the White Star Line that we had on board.
Canard White Star? Was it White Star Line or Canard? White Star.
The White Star. Well, they wound up being combined later on.
Later on they did.
Kind of like the airlines are today.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, hello. I was wondering how the wine bottles and such would survive at that kind of depth with the pressures that are on there.
Would the corks have popped?
I would think that the seawater would get in there, equalize the pressure, and it wouldn't be any wine, and the bottle would be fine at that point.
Yes, and anyway, the corks now have disappeared like all the wood work. The corks are eaten by bacteria and worms and so on.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Well, gentlemen, you've been quite fascinating in the way of guests, and we'll watch for your stuff in the National Geographic and for more developments in the Titanic. And don't forget their thing tomorrow night at the Hotel Vancouver. I think it's at 8 o'clock tomorrow night, called Sea, the Future Perspectives in Ocean Technology. My thanks to Jean Jarry and to Emory Kristof, and I'll be back after the break. Thank you. Well, I'm settling into my new 5 p.m. slot, and I hope you are too. It was such a cultural shock to move from Honest tonight that my whole system has got to gear around before my usual charming self. Tomorrow night, I'm glad to tell you that I've got Pat Carney, the Minister of International Trade, who is in the eye of the storm in negotiating with the Americans on what will amount to the future economic health of British Columbia. Not just, of course, in shakes and shingles or on the countervailing duty, but on the whole spectre of a conservative plan for free trade, free air trade with the United States. Tomorrow at 5 p.m. precisely. Here's Tony.